At the end of the 19th century, the world still moved at the pace of a horse. Now, this was an era of steam and steel, but personal transportation, that was still tethered to the past. In the industrial heart of Germany, though, a revolution was quietly taking shape. It was a revolution that would redefine motion, reshape our cities, and connect the world in ways that were, until then, almost impossible to imagine. But the idea of a horseless carriage wasn't met with excitement. Instead, it was met with deep skepticism, especially from the highest levels of power. For the German Emperor Kaiser Wilhelm II, the automobile was nothing more than a frivolous novelty, a passing phenomenon. It's hard to believe, but the machine that would one day conquer the world was, at its birth, an object of ridicule and deep distrust. Still, this widespread doubt couldn't extinguish the vision of a few very determined engineers. Right there in Germany, a nation that was just buzzing with innovation, two men were working only miles apart. They didn't even know each other existed, and yet they were both independently chasing the very same dream, a world powered not by the horse, but by the internal combustion engine.
And then in 1886, history was made twice. First, Carl Benz patented his Motorwagen. It was a three-wheeled vehicle designed completely from the ground up around his new engine. At almost the exact same time, Gottlieb Daimler created the world's first four-wheeled automobile. He did it by fitting his own high-speed engine onto a stagecoach. So you see, their approaches were quite different, but their destination was the same. And together, they set in motion a full century of innovation.
The path forward, though, was anything but smooth. The church called it a devil's carriage. Benz's first public demonstration, well, it ended in disaster. He crashed right into a wall. He was plagued by technical failures, public ridicule, and just a crippling lack of interest. Benz himself started to lose hope. The entire automotive dream was on the verge of stalling out before it had even really begun.
So just when the inventor's own faith was faltering, the future of his invention was secured, but not in a workshop. It was secured out on the open road. It would take an act of incredible daring from a woman whose belief in the automobile was completely unshakable, just as her husband's was becoming fragile. Bertha Benz was frustrated by her husband's hesitation. She had invested her own fortune into the project, so she took matters into her own hands. In August of 1888, without a word to Carl, she and her two teenage sons set out on an unprecedented journey, 106 kilometers to visit her mother. She was determined to prove that the Motorwagen wasn't just a toy, but a reliable way to travel.
And that journey was a true test of ingenuity. When a fuel line got clogged, Bertha just cleared it with her hat pen. When an ignition wire shorted out, she used her garter to insulate it. The wooden brakes were wearing down, so she stopped and had a cobbler line them with leather. And in doing so, she invented the world's very first brake pads, a safety feature that's fundamental to every car we drive today. And when the fuel ran low, she simply stopped at a town pharmacy to buy a petroleum solvent called Ligron, effectively creating the world's first gas station.
Bertha's journey was a sensation. This was the proof the world needed, proof that the automobile was actually reliable. The publicity changed everything, transforming public perception almost overnight. Orders started to pour in, and within just 4 years, Benz and company had sold 25 of the improved Motorwagons, making it the first commercially sold automobile in history.
You could say the spark that Bertha lit ignited a fire. The young industry that she had single-handedly saved began to grow. It started attracting new talent, and with that came intense competition. It wasn't long before other names began to emerge from the workshops of Germany, names that were destined to become legendary rivals.
One of those legendary names, one that would become synonymous with luxury, well, it wasn't born in a marketing meeting. It was born on the racetrack. An Austrian businessman named Emil Jelinek was an early fan of Daimler's cars, and he raced them under a pseudonym, Mercedes, which was his daughter's name. After a huge victory, he placed a big order for new, more powerful cars, but he had one condition: they had to be branded Mercedes. The name, which means grace in Spanish, was a huge hit, and by 1901, Daimler had adopted it for all of its cars.
So while the Daimler company was busy finding its new identity, another key figure was making his own mark. His name was August Horch. He was a gifted young engineer who had actually learned his craft at Benz. He saw the incredible potential of this new industry, and in 1899, he left to start his own company, Horch & CI. But things didn't go smoothly. After some serious disagreements with his board, Horch was forced out of the very company that carried his own name.
He wasn't deterred, though. He just started a new firm. The only problem was he was legally barred from using the name Horch. And this is where he made a really clever move. A partner's son, who was studying Latin at the time, suggested Audi. It was the Latin translation of Horch, which in German means listen. Just like that, the Audi brand was born.
Now, just as these pioneering companies were starting to define the automotive landscape, the world plunged into chaos. The First World War and the devastating period that followed would bring the entire industry to its knees. It would force bitter rivals to become the most unlikely of allies, all in a desperate struggle just to survive. The Great War brought all civilian car production to a halt, as factories were completely repurposed for the war effort. But the economic depression that followed Germany's defeat, that was even more punishing. Hyperinflation crippled the economy. The German people simply couldn't afford cars anymore, and the automakers were facing total collapse.
The only way to survive was to consolidate. So in 1926, the industry's first and fiercest competitors, Daimler and Benz, did the unthinkable. They merged, forming Daimler-Benz. Then, 6 years later, in 1932, another powerful alliance came together, when Audi, Horch, DKW, and Wanderer joined forces to create the Auto Union. These mergers created two new titans of the industry. And with that, the stage was set for a fierce rivalry that would define an entire era of German automotive dominance.
That iconic four-ring logo of the new Auto Union, it represented this merger of strengths. Each ring stood for one of the founding companies, a symbol of their combined expertise. You had Audi, which brought advanced technology, DKW, with its popular motorcycles and small cars, Horch, known for its luxury vehicles, and Wanderer, which specialized in mid-size cars.
But the industry that had managed to survive one world war and a depression would be shattered by a second. Rebuilding from the rubble of World War II, the German auto industry would have to be redefined all over again, this time by unlikely corporate takeovers and incredible acts of engineering defiance that would shape the cars we all drive today.
In the post-war era, the Auto Union really struggled to compete. Then, in 1965, it was acquired by Volkswagen. Now, Volkswagen wasn't really interested in the brand. What they wanted was its engineering. See, Volkswagen's entire success was built on the aging, air-cooled rear-engine Beetle, and they desperately needed the modern front-wheel drive technology that Auto Union had developed. Volkswagen's plan was actually pretty simple. Absorb the technology, and then let the Audi brand just fade into history. They even forbade the development of any new Audi models. But a small, passionate group of Audi engineers, they refused to let their legacy die. They began working in secret, after hours, risking their jobs to design one last car. The result of all that secret work was the Audi 100. When the finished prototype was finally revealed to a stunned Volkswagen executive, he was so impressed he approved it for production on the spot. It became an overwhelming success. It sold 500,000 units in just 3 years, and single-handedly revived the entire brand from the brink of extinction. The impact of this secret project was just monumental. The Audi 100 didn't just resurrect the Audi brand, its advanced platform became the basis for Volkswagen's new generation of cars, the water-cooled front-wheel drive models like the legendary Golf and Passat. The irony is incredible. The brand that Volkswagen had planned to erase ended up providing the very technology that saved Volkswagen itself from ruin. From the workshops of two rival inventors, to mergers forged in crisis, to a secret project that saved two different companies, the history of the German automobile is really a story of conflict and collaboration. It's a legacy of incredible resilience, one that has driven a century of progress, and one that continues to shape the future of how we all move.